Good morning, everyone. For this topic, for week one, we'll be dealing with electromagnetic waves. Because if you have a question, you can ask later. For the most essential learning competency, we'll be discussing or we'll have to compare the relative wavelengths of different forms of electromagnetic waves. And specifically, we would like to define electromagnetic waves, describe an electromagnetic wave in terms of its form and properties and the wave equation, and lastly, enumerate common forms of electromagnetic waves we use these days. So let us start first with the representation of an electromagnetic wave. So we have here waving black, red, at saka blue line. So what this represents, okay, let's start with defining first electromagnetic waves. So these are combinations of electric field and a magnetic field. So what your blue and red lines represents are the electric fields and the magnetic fields, respectively. So these are produced from accelerating electrons. So electromagnetic waves in the presence of electrons, once na ito ay nag-move, once ito ay nag-accelerate, produce electromagnetic waves. Yan. Sabi natin, we have a single electron. And in the presence of an electron, okay, whether it is moving or not, gumagalaw man siya or hindi, it automatically produces electric force. Okay? And then, when this electron actually moves, nag-move siya, nag-accelerate, that is when we produce magnetic force. Again, electric force, gumagalaw or hindi, yung electron mo. Pero once na gumalaw na talaga siya, doon nagpo-produce yung ating magnetic force. So again, electric force and then a magnetic force. In the presence of this electric force and the magnetic force, okay, we can detect or we can identify fields called electric field at saka magnetic field. Yung area kung saan gumalaw, nagmamanifest yung force, electric at saka magnetic force, ay yung natawag na electric field, yung nasasakop ng forces na yun. So, field ang tawag po doon. The changing electric field produces magnetic field, while the changing magnetic produces electric field. So, tapos yung magnetic field, it will produce electric field, or vice versa. Sinasabi nga natin. In this show, the electric and magnetic field travel together through space as waves of electromagnetic radiation. So once nagkaroon tayo ng changing electric field at changing magnetic field, okay, this will be manifested as what we call as electromagnetic waves. Electromagnetic wave source, may source tayo dito, sabihin na signal pa ng cable sa TV. Tapos, ito yung reception natin, yung TV natin, so may antenna. And then again, sabi na, what would be the main source of your electromagnetic wave?
Electron.
Okay, so we have here, electron natin, so you can manually or operate this, kasi yung parang, ito mismo program. So you can move yung electrons natin. Then why you move the electrons, what forms actually, yung kulay pula natin, electromagnetic waves. Okay? So once na nag-move siya, kung bibilisan ko to, so that is your electromagnetic waves or you can actually see or look at yung electric field. Pwede mo rin tingnan yung electric field. So yung kulay green, siya yung electric field mo. Okay? So again, we have your changing electric field at saka changing magnetic field. Yung sense magnetic field, yung color red, and then blue would be your electric field. As you can see, what would be the direction? How do you compare the directions of the magnetic field at saka electric field? So in this case, hindi yung kanilang direction, they are perpendicular. So makita natin ito, so yung na and goes up, then isa naman toward the right. Okay, so it forms right angle. So perpendicular movement. yung propagation pala or yung formation ng ating electric field at saka magnetic field. To further understand okay, how waves are actually formed, how waves behave, okay, so let us know the properties of waves.
We live in a world full of waves. When we say something is wavy, that thing forms smooth curves in and out just like what we are seeing from this animation. In the physical aspect, a wave is any disturbance that is propagated from one place to another in a regular and organized way. This can be depicted as vibrations from the equilibrium or normal state of a matter. These vibrations are displacements which happen both horizontally and vertically. Its highest displacement is the crest, and its lowest displacement is the trough. The crest and the trough give us the height of the wave regardless of its orientation. This is called the amplitude. The distance between two successive points, regardless if it is from two crests, or from two troughs, or even from two identical points of the wave, is called the wavelength. A wave is also a combination of the cycles of disturbances. These segments mark one complete cycle of the wave. This next segment shows another cycle. These cycles are recorded per unit of time as indicated by the wave's frequency. If these borders mark each second of a wave, this means that the wave has one cycle per second. And just like any moving object, a wave has a displacement per unit time as indicated by its velocity.
So then the properties, amplitude, frequency, and then the wavelength. Okay, so we'll show their relationship in what we call the wave equation or the electromagnetic wave equation. Given that the electromagnetic waves travel in a vacuum at a speed c or b represented by c or b of 3.0 times 10 to the 8 meter per second, their rates and frequency vary accordingly. Again, for electromagnetic waves in a vacuum, okay, as a condition or a medium, okay, ang speed niya is constant at 3.0 times 10 to the 8 meter per second. Ma'am, ito po yung speed of light. Yes, of course, this is light is a form of electromagnetic wave. Okay? So, vacuum, constant yung kanya speed. In that case, ano yung nagbabago? Given a constant speed of 3.0 times 10 to the 8 meter per second, its wavelength and frequency varies. So, siya nagva-vary. So, we have here an equation. V is equal to lambda times F. So, V, of course, is your speed. Lambda, that is a Greek letter. Lambda, right, that would be your wavelength. In usually meters, pero naman nanometers, pero you have to consider yung scientific notation. And then for the frequency, you have your hertz or per second. Hertz or per second. And then given this characteristics or properties of waves, you have your frequency, you have your wavelengths, and then your constant speed of 3.0 times 10 to the 8 meter per second. We have actually a very wide range of forms or forms of electromagnetic waves. Mga forms of electromagnetic waves that would be depending on the wavelength and frequency. In that case, we can illustrate that in what we call an electromagnetic spectrum. So spectrum yung sa kanya gradient. You can use that more familiar word. Okay? So, meron tayo illustrations in spacing wavelength. So, ito yung pinakamahaba na waves yung nandito sa left side. Yung pinakamaigsi ay nandito sa right side. In terms of the energy, in this case, frequency, pwede rin. Ang pinakababang energy ay nandito sa left, and then nasa right, yung ating pinakataas na energy. So, in terms of the wavelengths and the frequencies, what are those electromagnetic waves? What do we call this forms of electromagnetic waves? We have what we call the radio waves, microwave, infrared, the visible light, ultraviolet, X-ray, X ray. Okay? So this is what we call electromagnetic. So again, given the differing wavelengths and frequencies of these electromagnetic waves, okay, makakaform tayo ng isang gradient or isang spectrum of different forms of electromagnetic waves, which is what we call the electromagnetic spectrum. So before we end, let us try first checking your knowledge. Okay, so let us check. We have to answer true or false. Okay, so let's start with the first one. A wave is a disturbance that transfers energy. Dennis.
True, ma'am.
Natin if your answer is correct. So that is true. Of course, dinify natin kanina that wave is any disturbance. Of course, transfers energy. In that case, is natin nakita natin sa electromagnetic spectrum that the forms actually produces energy or provides energy. Very good. Another true or false. Electromagnetic waves cannot transfer energy through vacuum. Again, electromagnetic waves cannot transfer energy through vacuum.
Ma'am,
Juliana.
bitch.
The answer is, unmute ka, Juliana.
Ma'am, false.
So, tingnan natin. Okay, so the correct answer is false. So, sabi ko kanina, meron ng speed di ba, sa vacuum, yung electromagnetic wave. And it can travel and at the same time transfer through vacuum. Again, true or false? There are different forms of electromagnetic waves based on speed travel. Again, there are different forms of electromagnetic waves based on speed of travel. What do you think is the answer? Oh, Dennis.
Ma'am,
Dito ko
false.
sa points mo.
Ma'am,
Again?
false.
Bakit false? If you're asked, di ba sabi, different forms base daw sa speed. Tama? My question is, what is the speed of electromagnetic wave?
Ma'am, 3.0 times 10. Anong basa
10
doon?
to the 8 meter per second. That's
Eh,
correct.
apa,
But the question is, would that be the same for all forms? It would be the same for all. In that case, hindi sa speed
hindi po.
kasi yung
Hindi
forms.
po
Diba
sila,
sabi natin kanina?
hindi po sila nagbabago. O nga pala, constant nga pala.
Forms of energy arranged according to wavelengths and frequency. Kasi nga, hindi nagbabago yung speed. Same lang yung speed. So that is given that it is in vacuum. Okay? So yung electromagnetic spectrum natin nakadepende sa wavelength at sa frequency. Okay? So that it would be, again, the answer should be false. Okay, so lastly, for the last 1 minute, let me give this, your activity for the week. Okay, so we'll have here the electromagnetic wave theory. So there are different scientists who were actually responsible for the development of the idea of the electromagnetic wave. So we have here Coulomb, ang kanyang arrangement ay paganon lang. Yung reading direction. Coulomb, Oersted Young, Ampere, Faraday, Henry, Maxwell, at saka si Hertz. Okay? So these are actually the scientists who contributed in the idea of the electromagnetic wave theory. So for your activity for this week, so your task, so learning task 1 nyo, you'll have to identify the different scientists. You'll have to write their names here. Can you see my screen, of course? And then give us a brief description of their contribution. When I say brief, it's short, but then concise. And at the same time, you cannot copy and paste whatever you read from any reading material. So in that case, you have to rephrase or summarize them. Okay? So, lagi ako 5 to 10 words lang lagi, di ba? Kasi doon ko malalaman talaga kung may natututunan kayo. So, mas madali pati siyang tandaan kung mas maigsi. Or use other references, you have to write the reference here at the bottom. Nakalagay dyan. Importante yun. And then, for the learning task 2, madali lang. So, based on what you have learned, you just have to match. You just write the letter here, the number, the line before the number. So that would be just your activity. And then for online class, so you can visit this link, yung kagaya nung kanina natin, yung sa PET Colorado, yung simulation. And then I would like you to answer that column question. Pero these are not recorded actually. I would just like you to visualize what actually are the properties of the waves. Okay, so you can play with the simulation and then answer the following question. And then we'll discuss this first sa Thursday session natin.